What do you do when the game is rigged so that adherence to your principles and beliefs support the very things that you seek to dismantle? Alright, so this is going to be a part 2 to the video that I made last week about engaging your dislikes. In that video, I talked about why I think that this is an important principle to live by. But in this video, I want to talk about the realities of trying to apply it. Because the way things are currently set up doesn't make it easy. And originally, when I thought about this idea for a video topic, this was actually what I wanted to talk about in the first place. Because I was thinking back to the video I made about how I'm part of the problem when it comes to contributing to Hollywood's obsession with making prequels and sequels, or just straight up remaking and rebooting every story from our childhoods. I mean, they're making a sequel to Hocus Pocus. Why? Who asked for this? Do you remember what happened at the end of the movie? The Sanderson sisters literally blew up. Okay, this has gone too far. And I'm sorry if I seem a little heated, but I am just so tired of studios digging up beloved characters from our past and just straight up mutilating them. Okay. Calm down, Fief. Milk drinking Luke Skywalker isn't real and he can't hurt you. Anyway, where was I? Right, like I was saying. In that video, I talked about how my desire to live by this principle of engaging with your dislikes was actually contributing to the problem. And so part of the reason I'm making this video is because I wanted to go back and address what I said, because I felt like I presented this principle in a negative light, as if it was bad or something to be avoided. But obviously I don't believe that, which is why I just made a whole video about why I think this principle is important and beneficial. But unfortunately, the argued virtues of this principle don't change the realities of what I was talking about in that video. Even though I believe that engaging with your dislikes is beneficial, the application of this principle may contribute to the problem of this stale and stagnant storytelling that we see in Hollywood today. And so the other reason I wanted to make this video was just to air out my frustration, because I don't know what to do about this. And also I believe that the solution that I presented in my follow-up video about being part of the problem may actually be doing more harm than good for me personally. But we'll get to that later. Alright, so as I talked about in the first video I made about this issue, we know that Hollywood is first and foremost a business. And so their first priority is always the bottom line. Will this movie make money or not? If it will, I don't care how dumb the idea is. Greenlight this project as quickly as possible and let's get to production so we can get to this money. If it won't, well, that's why independent film festivals exist. And so this mentality is a huge part of the reason why we're seeing so many remakes, reboots, prequels, and sequels. It's guaranteed money. You basically get to hijack an established fan base who you already know love this IP and will likely pay money to see any story told in this world that they love so much, thanks to the hard and meticulous work that was done by the original storytellers. And so you can guarantee box office success regardless of how competent or incompetent your actual storytelling capabilities are. It's low risk, high reward. Now, obviously there are outliers and exceptions to this phenomenon, but you also have cases where movies that are considered by most to be good or even great fail to break even at the box office, which results in studios being even more disinclined to take risks on original stories. And so all of this creates an environment where the metric by which studios measure movies' success is by attention and revenue, not necessarily by quality. This is why there are 6 Transformer movies and a 7th coming out in 2023, despite 4 of those movies being straight up awful. And you know it's bad when both the audience and the critics agree that your movie was trash. But it didn't matter that the movies were garbage because money. And to really drive this point home, in my second video about being part of the problem, I talked about how Warner Brothers rushed the release date of the Justice League just so the executives would be entitled to their annual bonuses, even though the consensus by everybody who actually worked on the film was that this movie is not ready to be released. And that should tell you all you need to know about studios' priorities. And so in this environment, applying this principle of engaging with your dislikes becomes tricky and potentially even counterproductive. Because in order to watch these stories, I have to give them my time, money, and attention. And that is ultimately all they want out of me. They don't care if I didn't like their product. My opinion stopped mattering to them the moment they got my credit card information. If quality was the deciding factor in whether studios greenlit projects, this principle would help to diminish the amount of of lazy reboots that we get from Hollywood. Because it wouldn't matter how many views it got or how much money it made. If the critics and the audience thought it was bad, then they'd stop making it. But that is so obviously not the world we live in, and so abiding by this principle of engaging with your dislikes ultimately means potentially contributing to the problem. And that was one of the main points of my first video on the subject. But in my second video on the topic, I talked about what I think the solution is. And long story short, I basically preached abstinence. That's right, I went full Catholic school doctrine and pronounced that the only way to fight back against these remakes was to abstain from watching them. If all they really want is your time, money, and attention, then all we have to do is not give it to them. If that bottom line starts to shrink and the money stops coming in from these reboots, then the market will readjust. Hollywood will have to readjust. And so that's essentially what I've been trying to do. I've basically tried to adopt the principle of voting with your wallet, which basically means that you show your support for something by paying for it, and you show your disapproval of something by not paying for it or supporting it financially in any way. And no, I do not live up to this principle 100% of the time in all things. I fail to maintain this ideology every day, but there are a few key areas where I try to uphold it. And one of those areas is my decision to abstain from getting Disney Plus. That's right, despite the affordability, convenience, and the fact that their catalog is literally my childhood, I'm just not willing to fork up that $8 a month.
I know, just really brave stuff here, man.
What up? Editor Fief here. So I just wanted to clarify why I singled out Disney Plus, because I feel like I kind of came out of left field with that statement. But basically it's for three reasons. One, I feel like Disney is one of the biggest offenders when it comes to Hollywood's obsession with making prequels and sequels and rebooting all of these IPs that we used to love from our childhoods. Two, Disney owns a ridiculous percentage of the entertainment industry and they continue to try to monopolize it even more. I mean, the reality is that if you're watching a popular TV show or a movie, chances are Disney had a hand in it. And three, I mean, if you've watched any of my videos, you know that I've talked an unhealthy amount about The Last Jedi and really just how I've become completely disillusioned with the world of Star Wars, thanks in large part to that movie and really the sequel trilogy as a whole. And so for me, I draw a distinction between Star Wars and then Disney Star Wars. And I feel like Disney Star Wars treats the Star Wars world as just like a content farm, where the idea is just to keep telling stories. It doesn't matter whether they're good or bad. It's just, let's keep telling stories because we know people love this world. And so for me in my head, it's just like, I don't want to pay you to continue pillaging this world that I really love and respect. But yeah, so those are just three of the reasons why I draw the line at Disney Plus. And I just wanted to clarify because yeah, watching this back, I was like, that's a little bit random. But anyway, with all that said, let's get back to the video. And so because of this, I haven't really been watching any of the new Disney Plus projects that we have been straight up inundated with. And from the looks of things, will continue to be inundated with. I've mainly been relying on content creators that I trust to give me the rundown of what the shows were about, the narrative structure and specific storytelling elements of the shows, and the general consensus around how the shows were received. But remember when I said this? And also I believe that the solution that I presented in my follow-up video about being part of the problem may actually be doing more harm than good for me personally. Well, by abstaining and not engaging with these stories that I assumed I wouldn't like, I subconsciously started taking what these content creators were saying as truth. I had all of these negative opinions about these shows that weren't my opinions. I've talked about before how part of the reason I initially wanted to make my channel was because there's nobody that I watch, read, or listen to that I 100% agree with all the time. And it's true in this case as well. Just because I trust these content creators doesn't mean that I always agree with them. And yet I had started to just take their word for it instead of watching these things myself and formulating my own opinions. And I only realized this because last week I had the opportunity to actually watch some of these Disney Plus shows when I had to babysit my nephews. I mean, they're kids, so they obviously have Disney Plus. And so I decided to watch some of these shows with them. And the two shows that I watched were Kenobi and Miss Marvel. Now, I only got through a few episodes for each of these shows because in the end, I did agree with the content creators that these shows were not that great, but I definitely disagreed with some of their reasons as to why. I mean, if I'd only listened to some of these content creators, then I would have thought that Miss Marvel was one of the worst shows ever made, but it definitely did not feel that way. I mean, it really wasn't my cup of tea, but that's just because Marvel isn't really my favorite flavor when it comes to storytelling. But for what Marvel is and how they approach storytelling, this was a pretty decent show. And if I finished it, I might even say that it was good. Again, by Marvel standards. And after I'd watched a couple episodes and realized that I didn't despise it the way I'd expected to, I realized that, yeah, in a way, I'd been radicalized by these content creators' opinions, by other people's opinions. I was so ready to hate this thing for reasons that weren't even mine, because people I respected hated it for those reasons. And that's a pretty crazy thing to realize about yourself. And so that is again why I think it is so important to try to live by this principle of engaging with the things that you don't like, because it can save you from falling into this echo chamber of people you trust giving you reasons to either like or dislike something that aren't even yours. And if you take this principle outside of movies and media, you really start to see how important and necessary it can be. But I'll save all that for another video. For now, I'll just end this one by saying, yeah, I don't really know what to do. Abiding by this principle means that I contribute to this problem, but abstaining from it means that I create a whole different set of problems and traps for myself. So what do you do in that situation? What do you do when the game is rigged so that adherence to your principles and beliefs support the very things that you seek to dismantle? I honestly don't have the answer, but if and when I do, I'll be sure to make another follow-up video to this one. And just an aside, I know that I can just hit up the homie and watch the shows from their account so that they're not actually getting my money, but by doing that, they are getting my time, attention, and viewership, which they also track and use to justify their existence. So unlike the end of last week's video, this feels like a lose-lose situation, and I feel like I'm just trying to find a way to mitigate my losses, since there doesn't really seem to be a path towards success here. But anyway, on that super uplifting note, I think I'm gonna end this one here. Sorry I didn't have any answers. I usually try to present solutions in my videos, even if they're not technically the right ones. I don't really like just pointing out problems and leaving it at that. But I'm hoping that in making this video, I'll start to subconsciously start contemplating solutions so that I can eventually make the follow-up video to this one. But in any case, I really appreciate you watching and indulging me. I hope this made sense. But with that said, I wish you all the very best going forward. Take care of yourself, and I will see you in the next one.